Good day to you, wherever you are around the world. This is Coast Explorers here, and we are on Hong Kong Island. And today's episode is all about Hong Kong and how its borders have changed over time. Great episode coming up. Let's see what's coming up. In today's episode, we cross the harbour to Kowloon to see where the border was extended in 1860. We then venture north to the still heavily guarded border with Mainland China. We'll explore the forts overlooking the mainland built in the late 1940s to stop illegal immigration and smuggling. We'll take an organised tour into the border village of Shatoujiao and learn about the history of the community split in two across the border. We'll experience how the locals living in the rural New Territories get their fridge freezers delivered, and finally finish up back in Kowloon at an old former British Army barracks, now home to a Chinese cultural academy. Phew, let's go. It's Remembrance Sunday today, and I've come down to the cenotaph here in the centre of Hong Kong to pay my respects to the people who have died in the wars, not only World War I and World War II, but all the wars around the world. For millennia, Hong Kong, or Fragrant Harbour, as it's known in Cantonese, was a backwater on the southern coast of China and administered by the ruling emperors further north. Small fishing communities and walled clan villages dotted the landscape. That was until 1841, when the British wanted a trading base in the South China Sea, and after the Battle of Chun-Pi, was given in perpetuity the island of Hong Kong in the Treaty of Nanking. Being an island of just 29 square miles, I guess it was easy to defend. However, with the giant deep water harbour to the north of the island and the Chinese imperial outposts just a few kilometres away, this allowed for other countries such as France and Russia to send ships into the area, which Britain saw as a threat. In 1860, the British colony here in Hong Kong basically doubled in size when, following the Treaty of Tientsin, they took the Kowloon Peninsula in perpetuity just across the water here. Let's jump on the famous Star Ferry and then catch a bus to the top of the Kowloon Peninsula and find out where the boundary lay up until 1898. Just got off the bus here at the top of Nathan Road. Pretty much a straight run down to the southern peninsula of Kowloon, and we're here at Boundary Street, and Boundary Street runs pretty much perpendicular to Nathan Road. Nathan Road named after the 13th governor, Sir Matthew Nathan, and here we are at Boundary Street. This pretty much runs from the west coast to the east coast of Hong Kong, Kowloon Peninsula, and was the border up until 1898, when the border was extended up to the border with what is now modern day Shenzhen. Now you can see from this map just how small the Kowloon Peninsula actually was, but strategically it was positioned superbly to defend the harbour. Just to the west of the harbour you'll see Stonecutters Island. This was initially used as a quarry for the British in the 1860s and 70s, and is now used by the Chinese Southern Fleet as a naval base, and is now actually connected to the Kowloon Peninsula, so no longer an island. To the northeast was a lonely Chinese border post known as the Kowloon Walled City, quite famous here in Hong Kong. It had an office for the Mandarin, which was the local government official, and a barracks for around 150 soldiers, and it was surrounded by a wall that was 700 feet long and 400 feet wide. It was intended as a visible Chinese military presence near the British colony, and until 1899 it stood proud overlooking British Hong Kong. We'll head to the walled city on another episode, as remarkably it remained Chinese sovereign territory until the handover in 1997. So, as we head up north of Boundary Street, we learn that the border changed most significantly when a lease known as the Convention for the Extension of Hong Kong Territory was signed on the 9th of June 1898, leasing to the United Kingdom for 99 years at no extra charge the New Territories, as it became known, and Northern Kowloon. This also included 235 beautiful surrounding islands. The decline of the Qing dynasty was the catalyst for not only British Hong Kong to acquire the New Territories, but the lease of Port Arthur in Manchuria to Russia for a period of 25 years. However, this was quickly taken by the Japanese in the Sino-Japanese War of 1905. The French were leased the port of Kwangchauwan and was part of French Indochina until the end of World War II, and the Germans gained the peninsula at Qingdao, hence why it became a large centre for brewing in China. Following World War II, there was pressure by the Chinese and Americans for the British to hand Hong Kong back to China, but the British didn't bow, and it remained a crown colony up until 1997. Also in the Second Convention of Peking was a piece of land called Weihai Wei, which was given to Britain further up the coast from Hong Kong in the province of Shandong. Britain governed Weihai Wei until the 1930s, when it was returned to China. I hope to get up there one day to see what's left behind of the British colony. This radically changed the way Britain governed the borderlands. Now the border was 30 kilometres north on the banks of the Shumchun River. To the west was Deep Bay and the Pearl River Delta. To the north, the Shumchun River formed a natural border. However, to the northeast lay Hillside and the border town of Shatoujiao. Between 1898 and 1949, there was no border patrol in the area, and as a result, the border was quite porous. After 100 years of British colonial rule, Hong Kong grew in size. Migrants arrived from all over China to seek their fortune in the small British colony. By 1945 and the end of World War II, more migrants began heading back into British Hong Kong after their forced exile by the Japanese. The Chinese Civil War came to a head in the late 1940s, and many people fled to the colony. It was at this time that Britain appointed an experienced colonial police chief by the name of Duncan William Mackintosh to oversee the Hong Kong police force. Within a few years he had doubled the Hong Kong police force, introduced better conditions for Chinese officers, and improved discipline, efficiency and morale in the force. By 1949 the colony was swelled by the sudden influx of political refugees that something needed to be done. So in the early 1950s, a series of forts named Macintosh forts, or Macintosh cathedrals, were built all along the land border with China in the north. Along with this, a barbed wire fence was built too, but that was flimsy. It could be crossed just by leaning on it. So in 1962, a larger Danit fence was erected to stop illegal immigrants crossing the border. Now and heading up, not too many stairs, but it's midday, so it's very hot out here even though it's November. I'm going to head up to one of the Macintosh forts here at Pak Fu Shan. Shatoujiao is a unique small town which straddles the northeastern border with the mainland. In 1898, when Britain leased the new territories, the border was marked out by Sir Stuart Lockhart, the Cantonese-speaking colonial secretary to Hong Kong. Boundary stones were laid down what would have initially been a dirt road connecting the two sides of the border. That street is now known as Chungying Street, which translates to Chinese English Street. For decades, locals crossed over the border to trade and visit relatives. Even today, Chungying Street is a shopping thoroughfare where locals with special permits from both sides can shop on either side of the street. You can get your fruit in Hong Kong and your vegetables in the mainland. Colonial British police officers would be on one side and Chinese troops the other. The border became less porous and more heavily guarded after the infamous 1967 incident where 5 Hong Kong police officers were killed when snipers and machine gunners fired into the colony from the other side. More on that in a future episode. We can see some footage of what the border was like here in the 1970s in this clip from the British TV show Hong Kong Beat. You can see the officers patrolling up to the boundary stones with the PRC police officers watching from the other side. Time to explore now the town of Shatoujiao. So we've made it to the border. This is pretty much the closest point you can get to China at the moment. Just across there is Mainland China. We have Yanyan Street, which is shut off today, so we can't walk down it, and that is a street which is divided 50-50 by China and Hong Kong. You can see the buildings very much the same actually. This was a town divided into when in 1898 British acquired this on a lease from China. So it'd be great to go over there, but we can't with our permit. We have to stay here. Stretching 280 meters into the Starling Inlet, the pier here at Shatoujiao is definitely the biggest tourist attraction. So let's take a look as we walk along the pier. We're at the end of this 200-meter long pier here, the longest pier in Hong Kong, and we can see some delivery men delivering a fridge, taking it down to the boat there, because lots of people still live in remote villages. The other side of here is Hong Kong, and then around here is China, but people still live in remote villages all the way out there in Hong Kong and need ferry services like this to deliver all sorts of things, from daily shopping to things like fridge freezers. What's he doing? What is he doing? What's he doing? Oyster. Oyster. So just come down a little side street here. This really does feel that this is the border. Just through there, that is China, just over those steps. Got a police post here. And then the last, literally the last street here in Hong Kong, San Lao Street, just above the modern street sign. You could see one of the old ones, probably dating back to the 1950s, 1960s. There are still some left. The old iron signs here. Looks as though they're building a fresh wall here, and then there's a wall the other side, and then quite a nice looking building through here actually. Very un-Chinese or un-British actually, quite European in its looking. Beautiful banyan trees lining this street. And then I can see Yanyan Street is just up here, but apparently it is off the grid today until Chinese New Year. No one's allowed to walk down it apparently, so we'll see if we can have a quick look, but maybe not. And there we go. We've been called back by security straight away. Can't go any further. It's nice to walk down this little bit at least and get very close to China. It's only 24 years now until one country, two systems becomes one country, one system, and the border fully opens. So let's head back to the pier, see what's next on the tour. Now, with permission from a fellow YouTuber, Yanyan from China, she's allowed me to show you what the other side of the border looks like. We can see here the Anglo-Chinese boundary stones that run up and down the other side of the border. China have made a really good job of the other side, making murals on the wall and lots of reliefs. You can see here, this is the other side of the boundary to where I was talking just a few seconds ago. Well, it's mid to late afternoon now, and we found ourselves back in the city. We've come south from the border, and we are in a place called Meifu, which is pretty much on the top of the north of the Kowloon Peninsula here. And we're at an old barracks. So, and this is where back in the early 1900s soldiers would have stayed from the British Army. Back in 1911, 1912, this was used as a barracks, and then it became an internment camp. It then became a leper hospital, and then later became a psychiatric hospital. So lots of old colonial buildings around Hong Kong. This one now is a Chinese cultural centre. So if you get a chance to come down here, check it out. That's all for today, but we're going to come back up to the borderlands, find out more about some Gurkha regiments that were stationed there, how bagpipes plays a big role in the history of Hong Kong, as well as seeing some other viewpoints and maybe some more Macintosh forts. But that's all for now on Coastie Explores.